and thank you everybody for coming. Today, I thought I'd read a little bit from a text that we're going to be using for the new upcoming Jakai class. There are a number of people here who are going to be receiving the precepts, which makes one actually a bodhisattva, formally. As formal as one can be about being such a thing. And so it has to do with taking a certain kind of seriousness to one's practice. It has to do with taking a certain amount of commitment and also embracing the moral and ethical sort of results of awakening. And in the beginning of someone's experience, that might be something that we kind of take on faith. We don't necessarily know in our own direct experience how a Buddha functions in the world, how an awakened being functions in the world. Or maybe we do. But either way, these precepts are pointers to guide us along our own way of being ourselves. It's kind of interesting because in contrast to many of the world's wisdom traditions, rather than a sort of set of edicts from above that one must adhere to, what we have here are guidelines for how you use your mind, guidelines for how we wield our soul, so to speak, up here in the world of relative this and that. So, to that end, we're going to use a text called The Way of the Bodhisattva. It's by a teacher named Shantideva, and it's a beautiful text that really outlines much of what it means to be a bodhisattva. And the chapter in particular that I would like to draw on today has to do with patience and has to do with anger. So let's hear a little bit about this, and we'll see where we go with it. Patience. Good works gathered in 1,000 ages, such as deeds of generosity or offerings to the awakened ones, a single flash of anger shatters them all. No evil is there similar to anger, no austerity to be compared with patience. Steep yourself, therefore, in patience, in all ways, urgently, and with great zeal. Those tormented by the pain of anger will never know tranquility of mind. Strangers they will be to every pleasure. Sleep departs them. They can never rest. Noble chieftains full of hate will be attacked and slain by even those who look to them for honor or possession. From family and friends, estranged and shunned by those attracted only by their wealth. Men of anger have no joy, forsaken by all happiness and peace. For these ills are brought about by wrath, our sorrow-bearing enemy. But those who seize and crush their own anger will find their joy in this and all existences. So, it's kind of interesting because we all know that hatred is not cool. We kind of get that, you know. You might seem to be like, well, what's the need to even point this out? Obviously, anyone who would be interested enough to come and sit still for a few moments and gather like this would have some sense that hatred is not home plate, you know. But it's a very kind of, it can be a very slow burning thing. And it shows up in subtle ways. One could say that hatred has to do with seeing oneself as separate and saying, this is not me. I reject this. Right? So You come into contact with something that you do not want to be in contact with. Thank you, and yet here it is anyway. And a part of us says, screw that. And this is not okay. There's a healthy way of doing that, and there's a hateful way of doing that. And there's a difference in the karma. The other great poison, we say, is greed. And greed is the opposite. Greed is when you're trying to draw everything into yourself. So hatred is sort of putting up walls and barriers and lines. And greed is trying to engulf everything. And all of us do these quite well, actually. We're very practiced. You have your own style, well crafted over many years. The way that you do anger, the way that you do greed. And the root of these things is, strictly speaking in Buddhist terms, delusion. Delusion as to the nature of reality. So in Zen, we tend to go right for that awakening thing. We tend to go right into see the nature of reality. But also, it's worth doing to attack it from the outside in, so to speak. Inside out is awakening, which is something that happens. Outside in is kind of logical. It's kind of, it makes sense in a much easier way. And there are certain things that we call mind trainings, certain practices that we can take up. And the practice that's brought forth here is patience. And it's very interesting because the kind of patience that a bodhisattva practices is not wimpy. It's not just sort of like gutting it out. It's not just sort of like giving up and being passive. It's an active stance. And it's actually a very powerful stance, this kind of patience that's being talked about. I bet we could all recount moments that just a little while after they occurred we wish we could take back, and yet cannot. It's one of the reasons why we have that gatha of atonement in the beginning of service. To be at one with the goofs. That puts you in a place of power. You can actually do something then. But the counsel here is to say that, really, you're not a helpless victim to this will to separation. You're not a helpless victim to this impulse towards ill will. There's something you can actually do as a human being, and that's practice. And so, when we take our place on the cushion in Zazen, and we sit, we take up the seat of practice, you get plenty of opportunity to work on patience. It's loud, the incense smells, the knee hurts, there's traffic, there's the craziness in our own mind. And yet over time, you can practice patience. Every time you sit, you actually develop the capacity to be with yourself. So a bodhisattva emerges right now to give us opportunity. Is that not what it's like? Oh, I'm finally going to come to the temple. It's going to be so perfect. I'm going to just sit. It's going to be all exactly right. And then the coughing fit comes. I know the feeling. It's going to be just great. I want to hear this guy talk. And the truck's there. It's perfect. It really is. I orchestrated that. My first teacher, Daido Roshi, used to say all the time, because he had a really nice space out in the Catskill Mountains in upstate New York. It's really beautiful and very remote and all this stuff. And he used to get worried because he would say, I think we're getting a little bit too hooked into the beauty of this place. And it's becoming a little bit of a nest. And so several times he threatened to close the place down and set up like in the Bronx to wake people out of their stupor, you know. So we're not burdened by such a facility. We have the advantage, right, of sitting in the shadow of Walmart and the freeway, where life actually seems to happen for us. So I really encourage you to take up this practice koan of patience. It's a good thing to do, to really be aware of patience, and to take your Zen practice and actually cultivate a powerful, compassionate patience. It's the patience of a mother with a tantruming child that needs that medicine. And the medicine is going in. Right? There's a way to do it. There's a lot of ways to do that. Right? Some of them are cleaner than others. Right? So when we sit, notice there's a running commentary of judgment. I'm sitting well. I'm sitting poorly. You know, that guy sitting next to me is sitting much better than me. Whatever, you know. Just wield the patience sword. Bring a flower of patience to mind and hold it. And you'll see that this is exactly the weapon with which to disband hatred, with which to disband irritation, to take apart anger. Patience. Getting what I do not want, and all that hinders my desire, there my mind fuels its own misery. Anger springs from it, and it oppresses me. These are the words of someone who's looked deeply into their own mind. In our Milgatha we say, 72 labors brought us this food. We should know how it comes to us. So when we encounter agitation, when we encounter anger, when we encounter hatred even, repulsion, take a breath. See, how is it that this is arising? And then, just to say it plainly, if you need to act, go ahead and act. If you need to do something severe, then maybe you need to do something severe. That's fine. As long as it's not coming from hatred. As long as it's not coming from anger. You can actually be decisive and powerful from a very compassionate place. In fact, you must. So, shall we talk a little bit about this? Does anybody have anything they'd like to bring up about anger and patience, or shall we just fetch the kids and bring them in? Please.
We have an excellent representation of patience.
I can struggle with control, wanting to control. And like with wisdom medicine, trying to say what counterbalances control. And it kept coming to me as acceptance, less than patience. And I wonder how acceptance and patience kind of, how they intertwine.
Sure, yeah. You've had a good chance to practice. We all have dates with hospital beds. Everyone. We just don't know when the date is set. You can suddenly be in hospital mode at any time. But it's a good opportunity when it arises to, really see what's true. So, this thing about acceptance, there's some things that we really should not accept. And there's some things that we really ought to accept, right? And so something of wisdom is knowing what the difference might be. So it's a common mistake to think that meditating makes you just passive. Is an escape. In fact, I would say that my Zen meditation practice has made me more capable to not only tolerate myself, but to do something semi-useful with this self. And it has a lot to do with this acceptance, actually accepting who we really are. There's, there could be aspects of ourselves that really frighten the hell out of us. We haven't faced yet. Or we faced and been thrown down to the mat by and would rather not face again. But in your Zen practice, when you sit, if you're really sitting right, you're not running away from anything. It's actually the great acceptance. Somewhere along the line, my sitting turned into really just trusting. Really trusting life. Really trusting death. Trusting my limitations and my capacities, the things I'm clear about, the things I don't have a clue of, which are legion, but really learning how to trust. And patience has a quality to it for me which is very active. It's an active thing. Like when things are really not going down the way that I really hope they do, is when I can bring out this patience practice. And I do. It's a good friend to me. A dear family member is tweaking from something or other, and kind of losing it a little bit, right? I speak from experience. We had a large family gathering of one half of my family. A relative visited yesterday from Germany, which is where the family is from. And so all these siblings, some of whom don't quite get on with each other, okay, in a very German kind of way, they were all in the same room at the same time. Oh, that was interesting. That was very interesting, and you can see, I could feel this static electricity kind of zapping around the room, and this wonderful bodhisattva guy who came from Germany, he's clueless to all this history of stupidity or whatever, He's just like, family. Speaking in America, yeah, and he's showing pictures from way back and all this stuff. And it was a really interesting thing. There were certain of the family members who could drop the story and share in the moment of connection, and certain who really couldn't. Very, very hard time. The mind, if not well trained, is then poorly trained. Because you're training your mind all the time. It's just, are you aware of it or not? So if we practice winding ourselves around a story and defending it to the end, we get very good at that. If we practice patience, powerful, active patience, then that develops. And if we can't be patient with ourselves, we really can't be patient with others. So that's why, again, to bring it back into Zazen, when you practice patience with yourself. This is boring, I'm not doing it right, it's not working for me, on and on and on. They're actually evasion stories. It's a sophisticated way of just sort of popping out from a certain point of view, What is it to actually actively be patient with yourself for 10 minutes a day? Right? There's one way to know.
Do you have time?
Yeah. Till the kids come in, I think.
When you were when you were brought up the point of anger, I think sometimes when I've been so frustrated or angry in different situations for periods of time, I always come back to why that is. You're trying to figure it out. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times I think fear is right there with it. And I think being patient with your fears, is
Right on.
very helpful. I don't know.
Well, yeah, that's something like what spiritual warrior stuff looks like. Is actually being patient with the unknown.
Yeah, which would elicit fear sometimes.
And see, some people say, some teachers of mine have said that the more you practice, the more you can tolerate not knowing.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, that's a marker of depth, is to really own how much one does not know.
Mm-hmm.
We think we're in control of things, and then we forget that we're not. And then life comes and smacks you around just enough to remind you, actually, you're not running this, dude. Hey, Isabella, how much time do you guys need?
5 more minutes.
Okay, that'd be about good. So, it's an interesting thing when you sit. Like, some people can use Zen practice to kind of repress things if you're not checking in with the teacher, all right? One of the kind of eddies to go down is that you can get very good at sort of blocking everything. There's a way of doing that where you sit and you just sort of like shut everything else out, and it's really unhealthy. And it's not actually what Zazen practice is about. Because when you're sitting, if you get that subtle or not so subtle sense of fear or anxiety or whatever, what we do is look right at it, but not get pulled around by it. See? But it's not turning away. You don't turn away from it. So the addiction or the repulsion or the, wherever the hook is, to really be with it. And so in the sitting, you actually physically do this. This is the other thing, is that, it's not just something you think about or have a good platitude for. You actually do this with your body. Your body learns powerful patience, right? Every time you sit down in a way that makes sense for your form, your body goes, aha, this is home, you see. And then you take that and you carry it with you. For example, on the little walk, it's not just a stretch time. It's kinhin, it's practice. So you actually take this patience, right, and take it for a walk. Literally. Yeah, patience with fear, patience with craving, patience with repulsion. Please?
I just have a question about how you practice patience in a very fast-paced environment where you're expected to triple task at all times.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's like if a ballerina is spinning really fast, they come into center, like a gyroscope, okay? So, or in martial arts, if there's multiple attackers going on, or in music, I improvise a lot, so you're on stage, and there's these really intense players, and this music's going by real fast, and there's a lot of people watching you, and they hear what you're doing. We all encounter this in different ways, But the answer is finding the still point. There actually is a still point right in the center of all that swirling muck, or interesting stuff. There is a still point that's right in the center of the center, you see. And so, like, in the body, you have your belly button, right, hopefully, right, and then below that, about 3 fingers, and up just a touch, there's nothing there, but it's right in the center of the mudra, in this hand position thing. It's called mudra, right? So when I breathe, it's like I imagine there's a little ember, like on the tip of the incense, and that ember is right here, inside, and I breathe down to that point. And every time you sit like that, it's as though you take a little grain of sand and drop it, you see? And what happens is that center starts to accrue a great deal of gravity over time. It starts to become very powerful, so that you've got this centered root. And again, it's a body thing. It's not like a mental idea. mental ideas are fine. Yes, I should be calm in the midst of this crazy environment. Check. But that doesn't actually help. Right? So what actually, I mean, that's a good description of the thing, but what actually gets you closer to the thing is with your body and breathing and paying attention to that. So when you sit, if you really take care of that still point with your breath and really nurse it, and hold it like an infant and really care for that, then you take it for a walk when it's time for kinhin, so you have that same still point there, and you learn how to nourish it as you move your body through space. It's a very deep thing, Then what ends up happening is you can actually have that still point with you in the midst of a very uncomfortable moment of that difficult conversation that looms ahead, that you really don't want to have and is coming, right? You can actually take the still point and bring it into that. There's a reason why this kind of thing had great appeal to warriors at a certain era, to scholars at other eras. So it's with your body, and it's with your practice. You take care of your practice will take care of you. And it takes a commitment. Okay, please?
I was never more grateful for that concept than when I was in a dentist chair recently.
Oh, God.
And I found that focusing on my practice, I was never so grateful for that as well, but that part of my body that allowed me to go through the smell, the pain, all of that, and to just focus on the breath, I thought, wow.
Yeah. It's heavy duty, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
If you can function in the dentist chair, it's real.
You have
a
arrived.
believer out of me, for sure, yeah.
It's true. It's really true, But, I mean, for me, the things that are real hooks are like these emotionally charged confrontational things. Someone who, is really close and they just don't get this and they're really not going to, and there's no amount of dialogue will edify sufficiently. It's just not going to happen, And how do you be in that situation as a Buddha? See, how does an awakened being actually engage that situation? It's not that if I became an awakened being, these situations wouldn't occur anymore. I wish. That would be nice. But it's not really like that. It's like life is still like life. The dentist chair looms, right? But so does the flower garden. But how do you be a Buddha in every situation, right? So, equanimity is really necessary. Serenity, equanimity, presence. So too is wisdom, the nature of things, and so too is compassion. And with that, we'll see what the kids have cooked up. Thank you, everybody. An excellent conversation today.